The word mom encompasses a lot of different things. Now, you probably know her as the packer of lunchboxes, the bandager of scraped knees, the giver of wisdom. But if I asked you, who first taught you how to tie your shoelaces and gave you your earliest career advice?
My mom.
And who taught you the difference between right and wrong?
My mom.
In fact, if I asked all of you, who is the person most deserving of the highest award you could bestow, how many of you, by applause, would say your mom? In the 1970s, Northern Ireland, one mother was raising not only her own children, her own community, but she was leading the way where politicians had failed and helping to lead a country to peace. When Betty Williams first burst onto the world stage, the press described her as a mere mother, a housewife. She redefined those words: peacekeeper, protester, Nobel Peace Prize laureate. 1960s, Northern Ireland. Simmering tensions between Catholics and Protestants erupt onto the streets. It was the beginning of the Troubles. Summer 1976, Betty Williams, a mother and secretary, witnesses the senseless death of 3 innocent children, kids caught in the middle of a violent clash between the British authorities and the IRA. Williams decides she can't stand by any longer. A peacemaker is born.
We want to live and love and build a just and peaceful society.
Thousands sign her homemade petition for peace. Thousands, especially mothers, march alongside her. For her efforts in challenging fear and breaking down barriers that historic year, Williams is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And she keeps going. In the years since, Betty Williams has traveled the world as a champion for children and a warrior for peace. Please welcome our shameless idealist, Betty Williams. Betty, as you can tell by this incredibly enthusiastic response, people are so excited, and have to say, so am I. You've been a hero of mine for so many years. Thank you for being with us.
You've been a hero of mine for many years, darling.
Thank you. I've always been fascinated, because I started at a young age. How did other people find their spark, their calling to get involved in activism? Can you take us back to that day, August 10th, 1976?
Yes, I can, because, you know, that's the day that it's burnt. You know, did you ever see an action replay when they're playing hockey or football or whatever? And I mean, it's 32 years ago now, but I can see that as though it was today. It happened today. And I was driving home from my mother's, and I'm a Catholic, and when I used to go into town, my mother would have said to me, now don't forget to go to St. Mary's Grotto and light a wee candle for those who need it. So I hadn't done it that day, and I was going to my mummy's, and mummy said, do you light a candle? Couldn't tell my mother a lie, you know. I looked at her, I went to say yes, she said, you didn't, did you? I said, no, I didn't. And I had my daughter in the car with me, Deborah, and we were driving up the main road to turn off to where I lived, and I heard shots ring out. And you know that you're really sick, or you live in a very sick society, when you can distinguish gunfire. I could distinguish gunfire. I knew the difference between an Armalite rifle, which was used by the terrorist organisations, and a self-loading rifle, which was used by the British Army. And I heard the Armalite shots ring out first, and then I heard the return fire of the SLR. And I remember leaning over and I pushed my daughter down in the car, because I thought those shots were awful close, you know.
How old was your daughter at this point?
Well, my daughter was what at the time? She was four and a half.
Oh my God.
And I pushed her down in the car, and as we turned down, then I heard a car coming around the other way, and I pulled over to let it pass me, and it careened up the pavement, and I'm sorry, have a real hard time with this. And excuse me, it slammed into the Maguire children and their mother. And I saw that, so I'm sorry, I can't talk anymore about it.
Of course. When most people would see something of such extreme violence, people's response would be fear, but you were empowered to stand up. How did you find that courage?
It could have been my children. Maybe that was a very selfish way to look at it, you know, but how do you explain the destruction and slaughter of 3 innocent children that had no hand in any politics or any war, nor did they have a voice? You don't see my wee angels. Nobody can see them, but I go nowhere without them. And their names are John, Joanne, and Andrew Maguire. They're with me everywhere I go. I carry them in my heart, I carry them in my soul, and I love them.
And after seeing that, you took a homemade petition door to door and created a movement of mothers.
Yeah.
What spurred you to take that step?
To be honest with you, somebody had to do something. I mean, we were all sitting saying, I would hear the women, and this is a message to the young women in this room too. I mean, if I can do that, am I allowed to do that?
Of course.
To all of you young women, you're going to be mothers. You're going to be the givers of life. You know, I figure if God had wanted men to do that, he would have given them a womb. Sorry about that, but with no disrespect to men, because I love men, you know? So it's not a disrespectful statement for me to say that. But every child killed in our world, every single child that dies of starvation or illnesses that can be prevented, or in wars they don't declare, it's a mother's labour spurned. That's what it is. Because from the day you become pregnant, your baby, the first thing your baby hears is your heart. You grow that child right under your heart. How dare anybody destroy that gift that God gave you to give life? It's as simple as that. You know, it says, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say, but you can kill for this reason, or you can kill for that reason, or you can kill for the other reason. It says, thou shalt not kill.
But you took on one of the most intractable conflicts in human history. People must have looked at you and said, your actions are futile, you can never bring peace to the Middle East. What did you say to them?
Get out of my way. Because I'll tell you something, people who tell you that are people who don't want to do anything. That's the truth. The biggest killer in our world is apathy. Or it's none of my business.
I agree with you, though. It's making that first step. But one thing that I think was unique about you, though, I agree it's apathy, but I also think a lot of ordinary people feel powerless. Yours was the first time that a Nobel Peace Prize in the history was awarded to a mother. Did you know at the early moments that you were breaking history, that you were redefining what it meant to be a peace builder?
It was nothing to do with history as far as I was concerned. It was all to do with children. Maria Cardigan and myself didn't start this work to become Nobel laureates. As a matter of fact, when it was announced that we were the recipients of the Nobel Prize, this is not commonly, and I don't want you to think I'm a holy roller, because I'm not. You know, I'm not a holy roller. Well, sometimes I'm a wee bit holy, but not that often. But I went into prayer for a week and asked God for the courage and the strength, and said, you know, maybe I won't be able to do this. And said to myself, you know, what's it going to do to my children? What am I going to, I've got 2 young children here. But I was blessed with a wonderful family.
Do you define yourself first and foremost as a mother or as a Nobel Peace Prize laureate?
Mother number one. Number one. And you know, you'll hear that term, and I've heard it referred to a lot. Like, she's only an ordinary housewife. I have never met an ordinary housewife. Have you?
Well said. We have a group of young people here who are so excited to spend time with you, and a few of them have questions for you.
Whenever I watch the news, it seems like they always talk about war, violence, or poverty. I'd really like to do something to help, but I don't know where to start.
The newspapers and usually the television, they're all full of what went wrong in the world yesterday. Do a non-violent protest about the way the news is performing. Stop buying their newspapers.
That's
Hit them in the pocket.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu once told me he saw the newspaper as God's to-do list, delivered to our front doors every day.
That's right. Oh, I love the Arch. He calls me his crazy Irish woman.
Sorry, I love the Arch. Only you would be able to know the Archbishop Desmond Tutu that way. Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yeah, I've been working on against apartheid before the peace movement even. You know, we were working against that. And the day he cast his first vote, I'll never forget it. I was teaching at a university. And of course, I got the television on in the room so as my students could see it, you know. And there's the Arch dancing and singing and laughing and jumping up and down, you know. So I sent him a fax and I said, "Dear Archbishop, just saw you, he's 63 years old at this time, casting his first vote. Can you imagine that?" And I said, "Dear Arch, just saw you cast your first vote. Tears are streaming. Love you with all my heart, Betty." Half an hour later, I get a letter back from him saying, "Dry your eyes, you crazy Irish woman. You are crazy but a good child." He said, "I think the appropriate word is yippee."
Betty Williams. But I imagine people must describe you as crazy so many times, because it was crazy to dream that peace would ever come to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, do you think that we need more of those crazy dreams in our world?
Be an absolute idealist, and when somebody tells you you're wrong, if you can non-violently spit in their eye, do it.
That's a new interpretation on Gandhi right there, I think.
I talk to everybody in airports that don't know who I am, but I was going through Chicago airport a couple of years ago, and this lady was wearing a sign saying, "Nuclear is great." And I'm on my way, I'm running to get my flight, and I said, no, I can't let that pass. I just can't do that. So I went back and I said, "Excuse me, have you got 5 minutes?" I missed my flight, by the way. I spent 2 hours with that woman. It was worth every second of it. She took the placard off and went home, because I explained to her exactly what nuclear is all about.
Often it's the men who are responsible for war, responsible for violence. So what's the role of fathers when it comes to peace building?
Most of the men that I meet and that I work with, they don't believe in war. Why do we say that all men believe? An awful lot of young men join Army, Navy and Air Force to get a better education, you know, and all that kind of thing.
When I think of the role of fathers, I remember a story you once told me about a time when you came home after acting out and your mother said, "Just wait until your dad gets home." No. Can you share that story with our youth here today?
Yeah, well, I was only about, I think, 5 or 6, and I was a very difficult child because I was self-willed. Are any of you self-willed? Then you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. And that day, my mother had a flying slipper. It used to fly around corners. It was like a boomerang, you know. And I always seemed to get it in the back of the head, you know, sort of. Oh God, here's Mummy's slipper again. But that day I'd been particularly sort of naughty. And she said, she'd had enough. She'd really had enough of me. And she said, "Just you wait till your daddy comes home." And she started writing down things that I was doing. And I had never, ever been afraid of my father, ever. But that day I was terrified. So I ran up the hall. Daddy was coming up the path. I could hear him. And I ran up the hall and got behind the coats in the hall. Didn't realise my daddy could see my feet, you know, sort of. And I heard my daddy go in, he washed his hands, and I heard him, my mother started to tell him everything I'd done that day, and I stand and my mother said to him, Jordy, you're going to have to do something about our Betty. She was really, really impossible. And Daddy said, well, Margaret, what do you suggest I do? And my mother said, maybe you should smack her. And my daddy said, have I ever smacked you? She said, no, certainly not. He said, why would I smack something smaller than you?
Well said. I can't think of anyone better suited in the world than yourself as a mother and as a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. What advice would you give to parents on raising caring, peaceful children?
Give them hugs and hugs and hugs and hugs and tell them every day, I love you. My son said to me, Mommy, would you please stop telling me you love me? I said, I can't, son, I can't. My father used to, if we were sleeping, my father used to wake us up to make sure that we knew he hugged us before he went to bed. It was really annoying, you know? You'd be in a fast sleep and he'd wake you up to give you a hug. Love them, love them, love them, and show it 24/7.
Beautiful words. But as activists, we come face to face, and you've come face to face with immense suffering, difficulties in Northern Ireland, Africa. How do you deal with the frustration and the anger and the sadness that goes in your work?
Now here's where I've had magnificent teachers. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is imagine me being able to sit up here and say to you, His Holiness is a very good friend of mine, you know, which he is. I mean, I can call His Holiness up, you know, sort of. Sounds like I'm dropping names. I love him with all my heart. It's nothing to do with name dropping. And I've learned so much from him. I did a peace jam with His Holiness in Dharamsala with the Tibetan children in the Tibetan village. I was there for a week, and I stayed in the home of his mother, the Kashmir cottage, and it's just so gorgeous. But when you sit outside the cottage and you look across the Himalayas, and you think, God, his country's only at the other side of those mountains, and he can't go into it, you know? He can't. So His Holiness has taught me how to transfer anger, how to take the anger I feel and turn it into something productive instead of something destructive, because anger is so destructive. But if you can keep the energy of anger and turn it into something good, it took me a long time to learn that, you know. And I said to His Holiness, I've been working with you now for over 20 years. It's about time you married me, you know. He said, I think I need someone a little younger.
No, I even heard this story went on. I heard the next time you saw him, you offered your daughter.
Yeah, I brought my daughter with me, and the next time we were together, I said, I brought you something. He loves jokes. His Holiness
Absolutely.
Loves to laugh, you know. And it's lovely to make him laugh, because his life has to be so serious all the time. So we were together in Italy, and I said, I brought my daughter, you know, I brought you someone a little younger, Your Holiness, you know. So he went like this, because my daughter's very tall, 5'11", and he went, she too tall.
You know, I look at your own life, and especially in those early days, people tried to kill you. You faced death threats. How did you overcome the fear that was so pervasive at that time?
I refused to live in fear. I just simply refused to. I threw it away. I said, listen, fear is contagious, but so is courage. My Auntie Bridie had 8 children, and she was one of these absolutely phenomenal mothers, great cook, could crochet, could knit the most beautiful sweaters, and happy, happy, happy with her family, you know. And our Danny was a pre-med student, the smartest one in the family, you know, and he was gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous boy. He about 6'4", big blue eyes, jet black hair, and full of fun, you know. And on the weekends, he used to work in a pub, you know, for extra money. And when he was coming home from work, he was riddled to death with the sign of the cross, just simply because he was a Catholic. And when my Auntie Bridie opened the door, he fell into her arms, you know. And this is where I say, media, for God's sake, don't ask questions like, to my aunt, a media person said, "How do you feel?" How would you think she felt? You know, why would you ask her that? But you know what my aunt said? "I'm so glad I'm the mother of Danny and not the mother of the man who killed him." But on the Maguire children's little gravestone, Joanne, John and Andrews, it says they died that others may live.
It's been an honor and a privilege. Our shameless idealist, Betty Williams.